Hi, everyone. I'll just give it a minute or two as people start joining. So, hello, and welcome to the fourth session of the Ways of Repair, Loss and Damage Symposium. My name is Phoebe Lynn Elnan, and I'm one of the coordinators of Ways of Repair, and I'm very pleased to welcome you to today's session, which will see multidisciplinary artist Zahra Malkani present her project, A Ubiquitous Wetness, which has been supported by the Ways of Repair, Loss and Damage Artistic Research Residency. Thank you all so much for joining us. To those of you who are joining for the first time, the Ways of Repair, Loss and Damage program includes an online artistic research residency, a set of commissioned critical texts, a series of public events such as the symposium, all of which are aimed at facilitating a transdisciplinary exchange around the issue of loss and damage caused by the climate crisis. This program is part of the Loss and Damage Collaboration's Art and Culture program and has been very generously supported by the Open Society Foundations. Before we get going, I'd like to introduce some house rules. Today's session will see a 45-minute presentation, followed by 15 minutes where we will take questions from the audience. Attendees are encouraged to introduce themselves in the chat, but remember to select to everyone in order to address the other attendees. Please let us know where you're tuning in from and share your thoughts on today's topics, but note that you will be ejected from the session for abusive comments. In order to ask a question, you can type it into the Q&A box, not in the chat. This makes it easier for us to find. And don't hesitate to add questions as and when they come to you during the presentation, as you can still modify the questions afterwards. You can also upvote and comment on each other's questions. This session will be recorded, and the recording will be shared on the symposium website of our website, symposium webpage of our website within the next 24 hours. With that out of the way, I'll just introduce briefly the symposium. The Ways of Repair, Loss and Damage online symposium is the culmination of the work of the artists in residence and critical thinkers to date, and will take place over 9 sessions between the 20th and the 29th of January in 2025. This week, we'll see Zahra Malkani, Nombuso Matibela, Sibonele Gumede, and Gabriela De Matos presenting the artistic research that they have undertaken as part of the year-long Ways of Repair, Loss and Damage Artist Research Residency, alongside presentations that we've already seen in the past 3 days from Alexis Pauline Gums, TJ Demos, and Fahana Sultana, who have introduced their texts of repair that they developed throughout 2024. Next week, we'll see themed panel discussions during which the artists in residence and commissioned critical thinkers and other experts will explore critical links between the loss and damage discourse and themes already being widely explored within the arts and humanities in response to the combined climate, human rights, and environmental crisis and the drive towards decolonization. If you haven't already signed up, you can find the registration links for each session on the webpage being shared in the chat now. We also encourage you to visit our website and explore the digital restitutions by the artists in residence. And in today's session, Zahra will be presenting her project, A Ubiquitous Wetness, which has been supported by the Ways of Repair, Loss and Damage Artist Research Residency. In A Ubiquitous Wetness, Zahra explores musical and oral traditions that bring together poetry and protest as forms of remembrance and resistance against environmental devastation, dispossession, and erasure. She engages with these sounds as intimate and embodied teaching tools packed with deep ecological wisdom to offer practices that survive, adapt, and endure. She brings forth the rich and situated knowledges and the revolutionary spirit contained in these sounds as a kind of eco-pedagogy. On our webpage, you'll find the digital restitution of this project that provides an insight into some of the research that she has undertaken in 2024, and the link is being shared in the chat now. And before I hand the floor over to Zahra, let me just introduce her properly. Zahra Malkani is a multidisciplinary artist. Collaboration, research, and pedagogy are at the heart of her practice, with which she explores sound, dissent, and devotion against militarism and infrastructural violence. Working across multiple media, including text, video, and sound, she explores the politics of development, displacement, and dispossession in Pakistan through the lens of dissident ecological knowledges and traditions of environmental resistance. She is a co-founder, together with Shahana Rajani, of Karachi La Jamia, a Lamakan site for study, solidarity, and seeking. She was born and raised in/by Karachi. So I'll let you take it away, Zahra. I'm looking forward to hearing your presentation.
Okay, thank you, Phoebe and Deo and Lena, for this moment and for all the support. And thank you to everyone who's here. I'm going to just get started. So my name is Zahra. I'm an artist and a researcher from Karachi, Pakistan. And today I'm going to share some field recordings with you from along the Indus River region of Pakistan. These recordings are small excerpts from a vast archive of field recordings that I have collected primarily on my phone over years of research, meetings, meanderings across the aquatic landscapes of Sindh and Balochistan. These are sites at the front lines of the environmental crisis today, as we witnessed in the catastrophic 2022 floods, and continue to witness in ongoing flooding and heat waves today. These are also sites historically and continually subject to immense militarization and infrastructural violence, as well as a rich history of environmental devotion, defense, and resistance by local fisher communities fighting the privatization and the plunder of the land, river, and sea. Finally, this is also a mysterious and sacred aquatic landscape with a vast, expansive, and deeply syncretic, strange, and dynamic mystical life. The site of historical encounters between a multiplicity of religious and devotional traditions, a refuge for heretics and ascetics, wanderers and saints, a place where ideas of what Islam could be, could look like, could sound like, collapsed, refracted, expanded, and became many. I've been interested here in how devotion and dissent, protest and prayer come together in sound. It is widely acknowledged that in this region, the political culture is shaped by two main struggles: the struggle for the river and the struggle for our language. In this research, as you will see, I approach both water and words as portals, as slippery portals. I try on this category of researcher very loosely against the European desacralization and demystification of creative and knowledge practice, and the anxieties around research and representation that come with that. For me, the practice is devotional and dutiful, mystical and mutual. In the words of wanderer saint mystic Shah Abdul Latif Bhatai, may I seek and ever seek, and may I never meet. Bhatai was intoxicated by the ecstasy of never knowing. I'm going to just share a little presentation and we can start from the beginning, A Ubiquitous Wetness. The title, A Ubiquitous Wetness, comes from Dilip da Cunha's text, The Invention of Rivers. In English, we often refer to rivers, lakes, oceans as bodies of water. And just as the colonial relationship to the body is marked by craven desire for visibility, boundaries, and containment, such is the colonial relationship to our aquatic forms. In The Invention of Rivers, Dilip da Cunha envisions these aquatic forms as not bounded or discrete bodies, not lines in the sand, but as a ubiquitous wetness, ambient, material and immaterial, seen and unseen. The climate crisis we see today, and especially in the Indus River region, systematically being tossed between flood and famine, is a product of the colonial violence of the imagined and violently enforced boundedness of these wildly ecstatic and ungovernable beings. I have translated a ubiquitous wetness here as ek abai avarapan, which brings us to the topic of floods. The Urdu word for flood, selab, comes from the Persian word ab, meaning water. The sel is speculated to borrow from an Arabic word which means to wander. Water wanders. The impulse, the desire to wander, is fundamental to the fitrat, to the heart of water. and to wander is a fundamental practice in the mystics' pedagogy. The Urdu word for wanderer is avara, feral, wild, wandering, abandoned, exiled, ruined. Ek abai avarapan, a watery wandering, a watery wildness, a watery madness. Abai avarapan as research method. As I speak today and share recordings that revisit the 2022 floods, there is an ongoing struggle happening in this very region, Sindh, against 6 canals that are being diverted from the Indus River to the Cholistan Desert. Sindh has a long and intrepid tradition of resistance against extractive water infrastructures. In an interview I came across online, Shabir Laghari, an activist at a protest against the canals, says, "Darya hamare jeene ka maqsad hai." Maqsad. The river is our reason for being. Here, in the use of the word maqsad, the idea is not just that the river is what gives us life, it is also the river that gives that life meaning. The river gives us the means with which to live, and the river makes those very lives meaningful, imbues our worlds with maqsad, meaning. Over the past few years, I've shared sounds from this ongoing archive in different constellations, in mixes, listening sessions, performances. With the sounds that follow, I would like to share the ecstasies of fieldwork with you. In some mysterious moments of connection and collectivity, in moments where it felt like sound collapsed space and time. In Urdu, the word for sound, call, or cry is sada, from an Arabic word that means echo. All sound is only echo. When taken from the Sanskrit root, sada also means eternal. The echo is how sound moves across eternity, binding bodies across time. The echo is how sound becomes collective. We will listen to 3 recordings, collective sonic invocations by women. Each invokes the story and the spirit of a wandering woman, a woman seeking, a woman thirsty, a woman poisoned, a woman and water become one, an echo practice. So let's begin. Part 1. From the wake of unspeakable ruin, Zainab emerges as last witness. This Ashura, Karachi was wrapping up a 40-something day-long heat wave. Just a few days prior to this recording, temperatures had soared to 53 degrees Celsius. It was 2 a.m., Shab-e Ashura, the night before the 10th of Muharram, and the women were singing, as they do every year, of the Battle of Karbala. We were in an Imam Barga in Karachi, in a neighborhood called Meethadar, which, along with the adjacent Kharadar, forms the old core of the city. Meethadar means sweet door. Sweet door refers to the sweet water of the Liari River, around which this settlement first emerged. Kharadar means salty door. Salty door refers to the salt water of the Indian Ocean that once bordered this settlement. The salty waters have receded due to land reclamation and climate change, and the sweet water has disappeared under layers of construction, sewage, and collapsed riverbeds from sand mining. The Imam Barga itself is known for being the oldest Imam Barga in Karachi, and it is said that it was built by the ancestor of the current caretaker when he dreamt of 5 alams, flags, 1 for Muhammad and 4 for his descendants, flowing through the ocean and landing on the beach. In the morning, he went to the same spot at the beach and found the 5 alams lying there. He took this as a sign and built this Imam Barga right there by the water. Walking now around the neighborhood of this Imam Barga, there is no water in sight. The sea receded, the rivers disappeared, the pipes are full of sewage and arsenic. In Mithadar, like much of Karachi, clean water is increasingly just a dream, a memory. The Imam Barga stands in the spectral memory of water bodies that once were, water invoked in songs and sonic memory. A song about Zainab on the 9th of Muharram echoes across the circular halls of the old Imam Barga. O Zainab, at the moment of her brother's death. The story of the Battle of Karbala is all thirst and tears. O Zainab, at the moment of her brother's death, the battle plays out between bodies of water. Zainab was searching for water at the moment of her brother's death, was collapsing from thirst in the moment of her brother's death. Zainab, upon witnessing the thirst of the children in their encampment, begged her brother Abbas to find water. Abbas makes the perilous journey into enemy lines to the banks of the river, and it is just as he reaches towards the water that his heart is pierced by arrows. Famously, at the end of the Battle of Karbala, Zainab, sole survivor, sole witness, says to the enemy when asked to account for the battlefield on which he saw her brothers and children slaughtered one by one, I saw nothing but beauty. Zainab, as last witness, was the storyteller of Karbala, the carrier of memory, whose testimony echoes across Ashura today. She is remembered for her words, her voice, her speech, her account, the final act in the story of Karbala, the death, the thirst, the river, the memory, the echo. Part 2. Mirabai drinks the poison and dances. March 2023, Manchar Lake.
सुता जेलानी वो बुडल बेड़ा तो तारे लागे सुता जेलानी बुडल बेड़ा तो तारे सादा सासाया तो साई बेटो पार योकारे अदे सुता जेलानी दीवाता जेलानी वो बुडल बेड़ा तो तारे दीदी सुता जेलानी वो बुढ़ा बेड़ा तो तारे सादा सासाया तो साई बैठो पार उकारे देसोता जेलानी दीवाता जेलानी वो बुढ़ा बेड़ा तो तारे देसोता जेलानी.
Look, Jelani, how he brings drowning boats to shore. Praise Jelani, who raises drowned boats from the sea. The Manchar Lake is one of South Asia's largest freshwater lakes. Char means boundless, horizonless water, and Man is one of those impossible concepts to translate. Heart, soul, the boundless waters of the soul. Manchar is home to some of the most ancient fisher communities of Sindh and is remembered for its rich aquatic ecology. But this ecology, the stuff of poetry and legends, has systematically been torn apart by dams, barrages, and a relentless influx of toxic effluent. Manchars is an enchanted ecology. Dozens of shrines are located along and within the peripheries of the lake. Shrines emerge from and vanish into the tides and the flows of the lake. The air is dense with spirits and saints. This song is in praise of one such saint. The recording is from an afternoon spent in one of the last remaining boat homes of Manchar. Communities that once spent all their days and nights in boats and in the lake have now increasingly moved to land. And this last floating village is a village of mostly women. As the waters become increasingly polluted, the men leave to find work on land, to find livelihoods on other shores. And the women stay. The women are for the waters are for the women. The waters are full of poison. The 16th century mystic Mirabai was a wanderer, or avara, feral, wild, wandering, abandoned, exiled, ruined. It is the worst thing that a woman could be, a wanderer. Like most mystics, there was a turning point when Mirabai came ecstatically undone, lost herself in self-annihilation, embraced ruin, went full avara. Mirabai's madness brings disgrace to her family. Her reckless abandon threatens the social fabric of her community and is intolerable for the status quo. Mirabai is free, and so she is always in close proximity to death. She is adept, and so she keeps evading attempts at her death. When a basket of venomous snakes is sent to kill her, she wraps the snakes around her neck like a garland of flowers. When they try to drown her, she miraculously floats. And when they send her a glass of poison, she drinks it and laughs. She drinks it and she dances. Mirabai is like Shiv dancing on the back of the demon. This is the mystical craft. The demon has always been there in some form or another, a poisoned chalice or a poisoned lake. And so have you. Laughter echoes across the lake, and we remember an ancient song. Beloved saint, don't forget me. Bring my loved one's boat home. Part 3. Mai Kulachi sings the serpent to sleep. Ibrahim Hadri, December 2023. When I listen back, I think the texture, the sonic weaves of time spent with women is so different from the recordings with men. Unlike men, women do not have the option and often even the desire to detach themselves from the collective, to leave behind or set aside the babies, the lake, the animals. I resist the temptation to call these sounds songs, to render them sonic objects. These sounds are living sonic traditions that circulate in repetition, that echo sina der sina, that enliven and are enlivened by ritual and resistance. They are necessarily contingent, dynamic, and collective. A clean recording threatens to fix a song, to make an icon of it. Every leakage, every interruption is a truth being told. Every leakage, every interruption honors the boundless vitality of the tradition. Ibrahim Hadri is an ancient creek and another one of the oldest neighborhoods of Karachi. Those who live here are descendants of Mai Kulachi, the woman after whom Karachi is named. A heroic fisherwoman, Mai Kulachi was also a wanderer who is known for having set up the first settlement around which the city of Karachi eventually sprang up. She is also known as the hero who threw herself into the wild oceanic waters to save her youngest son, Moriro, who had been consumed by a crocodile. A crocodile or a whale or a serpent. It is a story that echoes the biblical story of Yunus, Jonah. It also echoes the Sindhi folktale of Soni Mahewal. There are as many versions of this story as there are people to tell it, as there are waters to locate the story in. Echo practice. Worlds on worlds spring forth in moments of collective remembering. This song tells the story of a mother's anguish when her son's boat returns empty to the shore. Storytelling is a cosmographical practice. Like the boat, memory is a vessel. Like the boatman, the storyteller is a medium between realms, a wanderer who connects stars and shores with voice, with sound. And the fish, the crocodile, the river, the moon, the birds, divine witnesses, all say, shh, listen. They're remembering a story. In one version of the story, Mai Kolachi softens the grip of the crocodile on her son, coaxes him to let her son out by intoxicating the crocodile with a lullaby, lulling the crocodile to sleep with a song. I don't know what the lullaby was. We heard and sang so many lullabies that day. It could be any, it could be them all. The lullaby is also a wild, wandering tradition. No one improvises as much as someone who is singing a lullaby. The lullaby is also a bridge between worlds, from the world of the awake to the world of the asleep, from the world of the day to the world of the night, from the world of a womb to this world we find ourselves in now. And perhaps these lullabies, sonic memories, heart to heart, mouth to mouth, can also move us into the new worlds yet to be built, yet to be born. I'll stop there. Thank you for listening with me.
Thank you so much, Zahra. That was so lovely. It was so abrupt also to end like this after having listened to the recordings. To everyone who's in the audience, I invite you to ask questions through the Q&A box if you can. And maybe just to kick off the discussion, I have some of my own. So maybe because we ended with this with this sound recording from Nasirabad. In this recording or in the text about it, you talk about the role of song in political struggle and in the lived experience of political marginalization, oppression, and abduction. What role does such living sonic tradition play in resistance, and how does this link to resisting, surviving, and transforming climate coloniality and transforming loss and or damage?
Yeah, I think a lot of my interest in sonic traditions and sonic practices is also connected to the collective nature of these sonic practices, and particularly the ways in which they kind of contain sonic environmental ecological wisdom. I think one of the early ways in which I started focusing specifically on women's sonic and oral traditions, and also became interested in lullabies in particular, was when I spoke to an ethnomusicologist by the name of Dr. Sabir Badal Khan, who's been really, really influential and helpful. His work has been incredibly influential and helpful for me in my practice and research. And Dr. Sabir Badal Khan I was asking him about the role of sonic and oral traditions in the Baloch political struggle against the Pakistani state, and particularly along the coastal region, what we call the Makran coast. And he had brought up to me while we were discussing this kind of really expansive world of really radical, powerful, political poetics and music from Balochistan. He brought to my attention what he said was that the most political, the most radical poetry is found in women's lullabies in Balochistan. And he really opened up this like expansive world of the ways in which lullabies hold and transmit a vast, expansive world of ecological knowledge specifically, and just how much in this region lullabies invoke the landscape and are a kind of an initiation for this new being who has entered the world into this landscape that they have entered into, but also an initiation for this new being who has entered the world into a political struggle that they have been born into, and that they are necessarily in some kind of a mutual obligation with the land and this kind of age-old transgenerational political struggle. And so that's how I kind of came into specifically focusing on lullabies and women's oral and sonic traditions in particular. I was curious about particularly what kind of knowledge and wisdom they hold, and also what kind of collectivities they produce. As I said, they kind of resonate and move through different, through very specific spaces and landscapes in relation to sonic and oral traditions that are considered more the domain of men. And yeah, and so I'm interested particularly in those collectivities that are less visible and in many ways more powerful.
Thank you. If I'm not mistaken, are all of them lullabies, or is it just the recording from the? Because I remember that you started your research with lullabies, and then I believe only one of the recordings is. But what made you expand to other sorts of sounds after having that sort of initial path opened up?
In this presentation, only one of the songs is technically only one of the songs is a lullaby, which is the final one that I ended with. But I think the ways in which lullabies kind of became this portal into like a larger world of women's collective invocation practices. I found that often when I would go into my travels or my research, or even with close friends and family seeking lullabies in particular, what that would kind of open up space for is just like a much larger kind of ecstatic moment of singing together to emerge, where it wasn't just limited to the lullaby, but it was kind of opening up the possibility of singing together in all sorts of ways. And so I found that I was not able to remain within the realm of the lullaby, but there's also such a large kind of, there's so much that I listened to and that I heard that is kind of, there was a lot of disagreement over whether something is a lullaby and whether it's not. And there were many songs, many poems and songs that kind of were straddling this like unclear ground between whether it's a lullaby or something else, or just a kind of a sacred invocation, or just something, or just a political anthem. The lines turned out to be a lot blurrier than I thought that they would be.
It's interesting that you use the word invocation. What do you think? Do you think there's a sort of common thing that the women are invoking, or is it specific to each song. And maybe you could talk a bit more about why you decided to focus on women and centering women's stories or women singing in this project.
Yeah, I think I think with the lullabies, I think, yeah, with centering women's stories, again, it kind of opens up and gives you insight into ecological wisdom and political worlds that are not necessarily the ones that are the most immediately visible. And I think when it comes to invocations and this question of what's being invoked, I think that's kind of what brought me to these sonic and oral traditions while thinking about the question of loss, because I was interested in the ways in which I'm watching at the front lines of the climate crisis, a landscape transform radically and irrevocably, what feels irrevocable. And I'm wondering what continues to live on, what continues to circulate, what stays. And I think that the idea of the echo and the way in which sonic and oral traditions are transmitted and move through space allow the presence of or allow access to what we imagine has been lost. Allow us to kind of bring our voices in unison with those or that which has been lost. So I'm interested in how what is being invoked so much of the time is bringing to life that which we may be under the impression that is gone. And yeah, I've always kind of been interested in this way or this idea that somehow spirit circulates through sound. Whenever we think about, in a lot of visual culture or film, for example, when you witness a haunting kind of makes itself known or makes itself present through voice, through word, or through sound before it makes itself visible. And so I'm interested in tuning into that world of haunting, again, when thinking about what's been lost, and then thinking about how invoking that brings it back to life in a way and allows us to enact a kind of a solidarity, a sonic solidarity with those that preceded us.
That's a really beautiful reflection.
Yeah, I don't know if I said it in this text that I just read out, but I was really thinking of the echo as that field in which the dead and the living are able to find each other, encounter each other in struggle.
Yeah, I remember that from the text. It was I can't remember exactly what it was either, but there is something about the connection between the living and the dead, and it's really lovely. But now we are starting to have some questions from the audience, so I'll read them out so that you can they can also have their say. We have Francesca Brusa, who's asking if you could say more about the relationship between prayers and devotional practices with resistance and dissent through women's voices, politics, and ecological thinking.
Yeah, I think that yeah, in a space where the land or the river or the ecology is necessarily known to be imbued with the divine, to simply be a manifestation of the divine, in a space where the land, the environment is so immensely, deeply, inarguably sacralized, the environmental defense struggle and discourse necessarily has to be kind of resonating in the realm of prayer, of devotion. And in this particular region, along the Indus River, that has been so completely devastated by dams, barrages, canals, toxic effluent, sewage, etc. There has been a very, very long tradition of sacralizing the river, of imagining the river as a deity, invoking the river as a deity. And yeah, originally there was a devotional culture around the river called Daryapanthi, which means those who walk the path of the river. And so there is this kind of long history of environmental defense is necessarily a history of environmental devotion as well. And those two kind of that defense of the river ecology is necessarily understood as a devotional obligation, as a sacred obligation. And the rituals around it and the practices around it, whether that's kind of singing lullabies or chanting slogans at protests, is necessarily considered sacred craft. So I hope that answers the question.
I think it does. But now I'm starting to realize that quite a few people have been asking questions in the chat as well. So there are more questions than I thought there were. But might be interesting to come to Rikita Biswas's question, who asks about the entanglement, who's curious about the entanglements between lullabies as protest and rest and effective labor within eco-capitalist economies of exchange. They ask whether these modes of mourning and poetics are subsumed between such architectures, or do they lie beyond it? And if so, how?
Sorry, I will need you to repeat that question because
That's okay.
it's
That someone who's asking about the entanglements between lullabies as protest and rest and effective labor within eco-capitalist economies of exchange. And asks, are these modes of mourning and poetics subsumed within such architectures, or do they lie beyond it? And if so, how?
Yeah, I don't think I've completely understood this question.
That's okay.
Do you have a summary of it, Phoebe, for me?
Well, I think it's a question of whether these modes of mourning and poetics are kind of do they take part in a sort of eco-capitalist economy of like rest and effective labor? Like, is this effective labor? Could we think about it that way? Or is it beyond? Is it beyond that, or it's somehow different?
To sing a lullaby to a child.
Yeah.
Is it rest or affective labor? I mean, yeah, I guess, I mean, I think like nothing that we do is really circulating outside of techno-capitalist systems. And yeah, I think I'll have to think about this question. I'm not sure it's something that's really come up for me, but I'll think about it for sure.
That's okay. But maybe that ties into Lena's question, who asks if you could expand a bit more on the importance of practicing oral traditions for their survival over Western-centric preconceptions of recording or capture as a way of quote-unquote safeguarding, and whether you see this approach as being transferable to loss and damage policy. Or I mean, as a practice, I guess.
Yeah, for their survival. I think whenever I think about this, I think about an anecdote that was relayed to me by a friend of mine, Sadia Khatri, who is very much a very big part of all of this work. She's all over it, and was there for so much of it. And Sadia, who is a writer, shared with me an anecdote about an anecdote that she heard from another incredible music oral tradition practitioner, Shabnam Virmani. And the anecdotes was something about how she had said something about being approached by someone who was discussing with her her practice of engaging with these oral and very much the same kind of similar oral and sonic traditions from the same region, and how this person kind of approached her with this urgency, with this real sense of urgency of, you know, what we just heard. These oral sonic traditions are so incredible, so beautiful. We have to save them. There's such a kind of strong need, this desire to save them, to preserve them. And her response was, you don't need to really be concerned about how you or we are going to be saving these traditions. This is what's going to save us. And that's something that's really stayed with me, because I think that, yeah, I mean, we live in these like incredibly destructive, horrific times of climate crisis and war. But in these really terrifying times, I feel that I am only witnessing the circulation and the transmission and the expansion of these particular sonic and oral traditions increase. I don't believe that they are under any threat of disappearance and that I'm intervening upon that in any way. I think, again, yeah, the idea is that hopefully this could save us.
That brings me to a point or a question that I had earlier, which was about how could we listen then, or who is intended to listen? Who do you intend to listen to these recordings, and how can those who listen to them maybe listen in such a way, like how can we listen in such a way that it actually is a pedagogy for us, or is it intended as a pedagogy more for the original intended listeners, which would be the children who are listening to the lullabies, or the people in the community who are listening or singing along? And I don't know if I can even like slide in another question that Savir Nadim asks about what your process was in terms of working with communities, like how did you collaborate with them in order to get these recordings, and whether they were able to engage with the final project or the manifestations of this work.
Yeah, sorry, I'm so sorry. Could you repeat the first question that you had asked?
The first question was more about listening, about how we could listen,
Sorry.
or who is intended to listen, and how could we listen in such a way that it actually becomes pedagogy.
Yeah, I think I've kind of spoken about this before. I think that's something I really kind of deal with and grapple with all the time in working in this whole practice, from the beginning to the end, from when I'm listening to when I'm sounding. And I've really kind of been asking this question to anyone who will be willing to give me answers. And I think one of the best reflections I experienced on this question was with a Ragi who is based at a shrine in Sindh called the Shrine of the Saint Shah Abdul Latif Bhitai, who I quoted in this talk. And this is a custodian of Shah Abdul Latif Bhitai's oral poetic tradition. His name is Dr. Bisharat Lanjwani. And he is part of a group of ragis, musicians, who recite the kalam, the verses of Shah Abdul Latif Bhitai every night in this shrine for 300 years. And I had discussed with him this question about listening, and just thinking about listening practice and what it means to listen and how to listen. And he had used this word that I really appreciated and that really stayed with me, which is ham kalam. And kalam means discourse. hum makes it collective. So to be in discourse with someone is to be someone's hum kalam, to be an interlocutor. And Dr. Bisharat kind of described the role of the listener as an interlocutor. So the listening brings the sound to life, and the sound brings the listener to life. It's a kind of a mutual practice. And I think that, yeah, and I think that there is, this whole time with this research, my interest has been in what kind of modes of collectivity do these sounds emerge from, and what kinds of modes of collectivity do these sounds give form to. And in my experience, these sounds give form to modes of collectivity that have this incredible radical potential. And I think that the practice of listening is about surrendering to the sound's capacity to bring you into collective struggle, to immerse you, to invite you, to allow you to access, to step into that world of sonic solidarity that it presents. So that's the hope. A lot of whether it's kind of, friends and family who I'm, hearing these lullabies from, or whether it's activists at tea stalls who I'm meeting up with, or musicians and people reciting oral traditions at shrines. This question has come up a lot. And yeah, I think that this is the kind of a world of custodianship of a certain kind of ecological and sacred knowledge. And when this has been so generously shared with me, with so much trust, in that moment, I also become a custodian of that knowledge and that tradition. And then I really have to grapple with, and I have spent these years grappling with, what does it mean to be a custodian? What does it mean to be a good custodian? What is the kind of mutual obligation that the act of listening to this sound entangled me in, kind of invited me into? And so in terms of sharing these sounds and bringing them out further into the world and transmitting, it is that kind of practice of obligation, of custodianship, that I am striving to do as best as I can.
Thank you. That's I think probably a very poignant note for us to end things on. We've had so many questions, but lucky for all of you attending, Zahra will also be participating in a panel discussion next week together with writer and poet Alexis Pauline Gums, as well as writer and activist Rebecca Solnit. It'll be next week, Tuesday, and so you can sign up now if you haven't had the chance yet. So you have the chance to ask your questions then, and to hear her in conversation with the other speakers. I think it's going to be a super conversation. So you can sign up via the link that is now being placed into the chat. And tomorrow we'll be seeing cultural worker, educator, researcher, and vinyl selector Nombuso Matibela and urbanist and cultural worker Sibonelo Gumede presenting their research project for Shoza, which is an ongoing transgenerational sound-based archival project that explores Princess Magogo's Ubugu traditional sound and photographic family archive. We will also see Gabriela de Matos presenting her project Candomblé Terreiros, Sacred Shields Against Salvador's Climate Crisis, that explores how the sacred spaces of the Afro-Brazilian Candomblé religion, Terreiros, could address the loss and damage caused by the climate crisis through their ancestral knowledge and their relationship to nature preservation. So you can go ahead and sign up in the links. And thank you all so much. Thank you, Zahra, for being here today, especially considering that you have an exhibition opening tomorrow at the Kunsthalle in Stockholm. So if anyone is in Sweden now, you could, or in Stockholm, you could go check it out. It's there until 23rd of March, I believe. Thank you so much to all of you who've asked questions. Thank you to all of you who've been here attending, being with us and listening with us, producing this collective moment right now. And thank you so much to the Open Society Foundations and to the Loss and Damage Collaboration and their generous support in making the symposium and the entire Ways of Repair project possible. We hope to see you all tomorrow or next week at the rest of the symposium, and have a lovely rest of the day wherever you are. Thank you again to all of you. Thanks, Zahra.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.